Hey everybody, thanks for joining us here on 9 News Watch. I'm Chris Bianchi and now joined by 9 News legal expert Whitney Traylor from the Traylor Law Group to discuss the ongoing King Soopers strike and some fairly significant new developments today and how that may play out in terms of those ongoing negotiations between King Soopers and its roughly 8,700 striking workers. So about, again, 8,700 King Soopers workers went on strike yesterday morning, citing unfair pay and bad working conditions. Their plan is to strike for about 3 weeks. Now, they're still picketing, and those lines have held strong so far, but today, Kim Cordova, the president for UFCW Local 7, the union that is backing the King Soopers workers, announced today that they will be returning to the bargaining table potentially at 11 a.m., or at least that's the way we understand it. That is within the last hour. So Whitney, bringing you in for your legal expertise on this. And I know there's going to be some subjectivity, some reading between the lines here, but Whitney, where do you see things standing at this point with that new information in mind?
Well, that's an interesting development. I mean, what we're talking about here is the parties coming together and trying to work out a resolution, obviously. And so earlier, Chris, based on the reports that I saw, the union was not willing to come to the table with a federal mediator. That was what King Soopers wanted. And so if I haven't heard this, Chris, this is the first I've heard is what you just reported. If they're saying that, yes, they're coming to the table tomorrow at 11 a.m., that's good news because that means they may not work out a deal, but they're at least at the table, which is a very important and relevant piece of settlement and negotiations and these kind of things.
Well, is the fact that, you just said it there, the fact that they do start going back to the negotiating table just, 2 days or so after the strike initially began, if they were to go back to the table, which at this point appears likely, would that be a good sign that this strike would let up before those 3 weeks are over and done with?
It's a great question, and the answer is we don't know, right? It's just like a divorce or a landlord-tenant dispute or any other thing. When the people say, "Hey, I'll at least go to the table and see if we can work something out." Prior to this, and I've litigated for years and years, and now I do a lot of mediation. I sit as the mediator, and one of the most important factors is the party's willingness to even be there, right? A lot of times people feel that they've been scorned, they've been done wrong, and therefore they're not even willing to discuss anything. And if you talk to them rationally and say, well, wait, what do you want? What are you looking for? Right? They may have trouble sort of explaining that. And so here it's sort of, right, it's the emotion comes in. So here the fact that they're willing to sit at the table, that's a huge factor, and really it depends on the effectiveness of the mediator. A good mediator, right, a good third party who's going to come in and try and bring people together can really have an effect. But if the parties don't even come to the table, there's no way to get anything resolved.
Well, suppose with that in mind, and perhaps without being overly direct about it, and again with an obvious asterisk here that there is a lot of subjectivity, and you're just reading between the lines here at this point because you're not at the negotiating table. The question I've got in my mind is, who do you think holds better negotiating leverage right now? Is it the workers or is it King Soopers?
It's tough to answer because the reason is the current labor market, right? We have employers are really on the short end of the stick right now, and we do the Help Wanted Wednesday segment every Wednesday where we feature an employer who's seeking out qualified employees. But because of the tight labor market, employees are demanding more, and in a lot of ways, I'm a plaintiff's employment lawyer. So in a lot of ways, I'm, kind of biased, if you will. But, reporting objectively, I'm saying, look, folks need to, we're talking about terms and conditions of your employment. And after the pandemic, after George Floyd, I think everybody kind of stepped back and said, what really matters to me? What's really important? And I think employers really need to realize that. And so in that regard, I think the employees have a bit of an upper hand. Now, the labor market and strikes and things like that have gone on for years and years. That's all regulated by the Fair Labor Standards Act, a federal statute. And so there's certain things that both the union and King Soopers have to do, and they've both been compliant. And so I guess I would say I think the employees have a little bit of an advantage just based on the current labor market and finding good employees.
Is there any, and again, this may be straying to the realm of where we're going here, but out of curiosity, does Bernie Sanders weighing in yesterday, and he tweeted about the King Soopers strike, and he backed the workers, he backed the striking workers yesterday. Does that, in your mind, put any added pressure on a possible resolution, or is it just white noise?
Man, it's a great point, and I think it's probably a little bit of both, right? I mean, we've just become so politicized and so
Mm-hmm.
polarized, right, that everything becomes white noise. So a lot of conservatives, moderates, whatever, will hear Bernie Sanders and just check out, on on that point alone. But I think it's really important to recognize we're in an era of what I call people power, right? We've seen people taking to the streets and protesting. We saw with the stock market, people jumping on Robinhood and kind of beating out the big guy. You have these strikes. I mean, it is this David and Goliath kind of notion. And the reality is that, the righteousness is on the David side, right? But here I would say, I haven't been at the negotiation table, but King Soopers has put a bunch of money on the table, and the workers or the union is saying, no, we're not happy with that because you're asking us to make all these concessions. It sounds like, and I've read a lot of reports, but I haven't been at the table. It sounds like the union is sort of all or nothing, right? Like, give us everything or we're not even going to negotiate. And to me, that's a terrible starting place for a negotiation. Now, the fact that you're telling me, hey, they're showing up tomorrow, that's significant, that's relevant, and that's good news. That means, if it's a good mediator, they may be able to get the job done and get the issue resolved.
I guess my final main question, somebody who has presided over litigations and situations like this before, is there anything out of the ordinary or strange that you're seeing in these negotiations, or would you characterize this, based on what you've seen so far, as fairly standard for this type of dispute?
I think it's fairly standard. I mean, it's garden variety, right? The union wants more money. King Soopers doesn't want to give certain concessions. I think what makes this unique is certainly the pandemic, right? Because one of the things that the workers wanted, they were concerned about their safety on two fronts, both on the rise in violence in Colorado and across the nation, but also in as it relates to the pandemic. So I think certainly the pandemic complicates things and raises a nuance, because these workers, are frontline workers, and they're saying, look, you're paying us 14, 15, $16 an hour, but not giving us proper health insurance. You're not giving us any safety measures. You're not implementing safety measures. So, from their perspective, that is a unique element, a nuance, if you will. But otherwise, I think this is a traditional labor management dispute. And, I tell my students this all the time. We had 4 years of Donald Trump where so many things were questioned and challenged, right? And our system worked, right? We had our checks and balances. And here, this is the same thing. We have a system set up where labor and management can come to a disagreement. And even though people are like, wait, this is a strike. Well, the strike is, all of that is statutory. That's all under the Fair Labor Standards Act. That's all part of the collective bargaining agreement. So this is, effectively working systematically, and in a way we can say, good, the system's working, right? They're going to resolve it through this process.
That's a really interesting analogy. I had not thought of that, but that's of course why we have you on, 90s legal expert Whitney Traylor. And I guess my final question, I guess, is: are there any final thoughts on this dispute and how things are going between the two sides? With the obvious caveat that as we record this at 2 p.m. here on Thursday, that things could change in the next few hours.
So many things can change. I think the takeaway, honestly, Chris, is, I'm looking at this as a legal analyst. I'm looking at the statutory laws, and I'm looking at the collective bargaining agreement, and things are sort of processing as they should. But I think there's a bigger picture which is relevant to where we are in society, and it's really our ability to have conflict resolution, right? This hasn't gotten violent. Nobody's shooting anybody. Nobody's physically challenging anybody. So, the process is working. But I guess what I would say is that we're in a polarized time, and the institutions are working. But I guess I would encourage people to say this is an opportunity for us to really look at how we do conflict resolution, right? The process is working. They're striking. They're drawing attention to it. They're trying to hit King Soopers where in Kroger where it counts, which is the pocketbook. And some of the workers, I understand their frustration. Last year and the last 2 years, the grocery industry, I think Kroger made $4 billion last year compared to 2019 where they made $3 billion. So some people are saying, look, you're making a ton of money. You got the lowest level workers, the lowest paid workers, the frontline folks, and you're not willing to, put some money up. And I'm not taking a position against management, but I am taking a position that says, look, everybody, we all have the ability to resolve these conflicts at every level. I'm a litigator. Way before you involve me, there's ability to get things done, right? Like, just take a deep breath and let's try and move forward together. Because the reality, I know this is a little bit on my soapbox, but since we had 10 or 15 minutes, I'm used to 3 or 4 minutes. I'm gonna say, like, hey man, we're all in this together, right? And we really are all in this together. So this is an opportunity for leadership. This is an opportunity for King Soopers to step up and say, here's how we represent as a corporate game player in this world, right? Like, here's how we're going to treat our employees. And again, I'm not putting the pressure on King Soopers, but I'm just saying this is an opportunity for us to sort of move forward and show a way of how we can do conflict resolution.
And hopefully today, the development that seems like at least the union's willing to go back to the negotiating table may be an optimistic sign in that direction. Hopefully, to your point there, Whitney, that we may be, hopefully, knock on wood here, because I think it's in everyone's best interest, clearly at this point, that these are frontline workers. This is an essential thing. We're talking about grocery store workers. That this gets resolved sooner or later.
It's a great point, and it's true. I saw stories on 9 News where they were saying, look, I can't pay my mortgage, I can't pay my rent. This is a real stretch for me. And the reality is, King Soopers recognize that these are, these are real life, right, people. And so they're taking a very sort of vulnerable, a big risk in doing this. And I agree with you. And it's like, look, guys, they were already willing to put, King Soopers put 170 million on the table. They said over the next 3 years, we'll raise everybody's pay. I think the lowest employee would get $16. But then at the same time, they bring in these temporary workers and they're offering people $18 an hour. So it looks like a little bit of a middle finger to people in some ways when they're, simply, a very simple analysis is, hey, that's a middle finger to me. And the reality is obviously King Soopers has to keep functioning and what have you. But yeah, man, when we get this resolved, that works better for the employees, for King Soopers, and of course for the customers.
Well, there you have it. Well, Whitney, we really appreciate a few minutes of your time. 9 News legal expert Whitney Traylor with an update there and some really insightful analysis here about how this dispute is ongoing and how it could go here over the next few weeks. So, Whitney, we really appreciate a few minutes of your time.
It's great to talk to you. It's good we haven't met, Chris, but I watch you. I'm a fan, and I got to get on my Spanish, so maybe you can help me with that.
Well, it's a pleasure to meet you virtually as well, and I'm sure it'll happen in person sooner rather than later. But again, 9News legal expert Whitney Traylor, thank you so much for joining us here. Very, very insightful and very, very good points as well.
Thank you. Good to be here.